Hello, I'm Deborah Malone, founder of The Internationalist and host of Internationalist Marketing TV. Today's guest is Pete Blackshaw, CEO of Cintrifuse, the Cincinnati-based startup community and investment fund. Pete, welcome to the show. It is such a pleasure to see you, particularly with such a dynamic background.
Oh, thanks for inviting me.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, the last time that we connected, you were Nestle's global head of digital marketing and social media, and I recall that you were helping to lead change, not only at one of the world's biggest food companies, but you were also reshaping a lot of attitudes toward marketing's value. So, you have always operated at the intersection of digital transformation and marketing. So talk about this transition.
Yeah, well, first off, I had a wonderful time at Nestle. It was just an incredible opportunity and honor to kind of work at a 150-year-old company and really kind of help their migration to the digital space and the social space, which was both playing offense and defense because the internet has opened up a world of new voices that are kind of holding companies more accountable, driving more transparency. And, we had to really ensure that it was much more than just a marketing issue. We had to really make sure that there was, substance behind everything, behind the brand. But there was also some fantastic opportunities to really take brand principles to the next level. And we really had, it was just a fantastic experience. And what I loved most about it was, when in a global company, you're working with, 100, 150 markets, and they all kind of are at different stages in the digital transformation and kind of bring different know-how and experience to the table. China and mobile, Philippines with word of mouth. India was more advanced on content systems. US was ahead on, programmatic media, and then kind of just grafting that, using that as a knowledge base that you can cross-fertilize. And so that was just absolutely fascinating. But I did a lot of work in innovation. It's hard to lead, digital or marketing without, staring at innovation, in the face. And it's really about what's next, seeing around corners, figuring out that disruptive growth curve. And so, so while I was at Nestle, I had created a Silicon Valley Innovation Outpost. We created innovation leadership teams to really take advantage of kind of the emerging tech, and then did a fair amount of work on open innovation. And so to some extent, that laid foundation for this incredible opportunity that knocked on my door here in Cincinnati, a city that I had kind of adopted before going to Nestle. And they had developed a really interesting model in partnership with Procter Gamble, Kroger, Western and Southern, Fifth Third, and a bunch of other really, really big companies. And it was a bit of an external focus exercise where they wanted to become a startup economy. I think today, to really attract talent, you have to, the presence of a startup economy is one of the biggest attractors of talent, even if you're going to a large company. If you talk to anybody in HR today, but also startups can create wonderful synergies with where the companies are going. And even today, we talk a lot about the localization of supply chain. So I ended up joining this company called Cintrifuse, which had a lot of elements of what I was doing at Nestle, but towards a lot of different companies. And what I'm basically doing is I've got three parts of the business, and they all kind of talk to each other. Number one, I manage a storefront of services for entrepreneurs. So game changers, innovators, idealists, romantics, kind of tech mavens who are looking to figure out what's next, and ideally with an eye towards serving a need or a business challenge with a big company that's nearby who could become the customer. We also do a lot of corporate innovation where we'll go into P&G or others and kind of look under the hood and sort of say, hey, listen, you need to figure out the metaverse, and hey, we've got a solution for you right down the corner in the form of a startup or an entrepreneur. And then the third leg of the stool is we have a fund of fund. And this is what makes it very unique. You probably won't find this in other geographies anywhere on the globe, where our big cos put a bunch of money, about $120 million, into a strategic fund of funds where we invest in the world's top venture capital firms. And what that does, it gives us access to innovations and innovators that can really change, not only drive great returns, but also kind of bring a completely different way of thinking about technology, where marketing's going, where supply chains are going, where green is going. And that part has been a lot of fun. And not only a lot of fun for me personally, as you think about the arc of one's career, is probably giving me the newest white space. Like, this is kind of like new territory for me to figure out. It's been both a challenge, but it's also been incredibly, enlightening.
Well, to be honest, I mean, what you've just said is pretty extraordinary, because I can't imagine that many people who have the skill set that you do in terms of, all of the things that you've done in your career, in terms of working for large companies and small, being an entrepreneur, being someone who's in touch with innovation. I find it very difficult to imagine that there's many people who would be able to coalesce those 3 points. And it sounds like one of the things that you said that was quite fascinating is something you've said a lot, which is looking around corners. And you did talk a little bit about what that means for marketing, for technology, and for green. Now, I can see, for those of us who have the video version, that you've got a lovely green planet behind you in the midst of Cincinnati. So I'm assuming that one of the things that you're seeing around corners has a lot to do with green initiatives and dare I say, sustainability. Do you want to talk about that a little?
Well, it goes back to, I have to take it back to Nestle, because, when I was hired at Nestle, they created my position in the wake of what I might characterize as a social media meltdown around a green supply chain issue. Greenpeace had a big issue with Nestle around the sourcing of palm oil, killing the orangutans allegedly. And then the way Nestle responded to the crisis on social media showed a bit of a digital illiteracy that kind of created the conditions for them to say, you'll be able to edit this out, right? Okay, I was on a roll. That's the last one. Okay, good. So let me kind of go back to the.
No worries. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'll take your question back to Nestle, because when I was hired by Nestle, few people realize this, but my position was created because the company had experienced a bit of a social media meltdown around the sourcing of palm oil, and Greenpeace, not only made a big issue about that, but they leveraged their digital skills and acumen in social media to really challenge Nestle, to the point where Nestle kind of threw up their hands and said, okay, we need to bring an outsider in. We need to go from a typical social media or digital manager to a VP. And we even need to think about a different way of creating the position, kind of a blend between marketing and public policy. So I took that job, not only leading digital, but kind of looking at this new world of accountability that the radically transparent principles of the web are kind of bringing to bear. And again, Google never forgets, Wikipedia never forgets. And so sustainable supply chains were almost like permanently chiseled into my head when I was at Nestle. You could not avoid it. And so it did start to develop an appreciation for how important it is to play defense. But it also was a big awakening at how the new customers care about that topic. Now, today, none of us blink about the fact that, a green TikToker will get 20 million views by taking down a consumer product and sort of saying, hey, you don't need the plastic, here's my solution. And I saw a lot of that. I saw a lot of that kind of starting to kind of bubble up as consumers started to leverage social media channels. So that really was like kind of a pivot moment for me. There's an entry point on the defensive side, like how do I help Nestle get out of jail, so to speak, with all these activists raising these issues. But then you start to realize that, boy, there really are opportunities. And what was interesting is that as I started to look at market share, you started to see that a lot of ankle biter companies that were kind of getting out of the gate fast in the food industry were healthy, organic, and they were really kind of challenging this this big scaled, kind of a ostensible incumbent strength that Nestle had. And I was like, oh yeah, there's like a lot of opportunity there. And so, and then the other thing that really was pivotal to me, and I'm very grateful that the new CEO of Nestle, who I had a chance to work with for about a year and a half, really almost like from the day that he came to this, the company was like, hey, we got to do something about plastics. Isn't this obvious? And so sometimes when you're dealing with so many issues, you like just forget about the obvious. And I just thought, and it's right, you just got so much scrutiny over, what's in the product, how it's made, how it's transported. And so when I got back to Cincinnati, I looked around and I was looking for areas where a concentration of talent, technology, and capital can create an outsized advantage. And you see that in different regions. Austin, Texas has a couple areas of a strength. If you look at Memphis and Nashville, they're very strong in health tech. Pittsburgh's developing a real identity around AI. Detroit is doing a great job on mobility. And as I looked around greater Cincinnati and started to take stock and inventory of where there are strengths, I was kind of blown away. Number one, our neighbor Kroger was putting out some of the most bold moonshot ambitions related to zero hunger, zero waste. And so I was thinking, oh, okay, that's interesting. You've got the world's third largest retailer basically saying, we got to get rid of the plastic bags and we got to do 5 other things by a relatively tight timetable. When I hear that, I think startup opportunity. Can I find startups that can be part of that answer locally? And then I started looking at scorecards and I'm like, oh my gosh, Cincinnati's rated the #1 most sustainable city in America. And I had to do a double take. I'm like, you got to be kidding. And then I started to peel the onion and I found out it's because of all of the leads scores, so all the new builds. It's one of the most progressive cities in the world in terms of like new buildings, and they've got the most sustainable zoo. And then on top of that, you got the world's largest advertiser down the street. And you start to realize, okay, now there might be a really interesting opportunity to take these, take a kind of an environment that, okay, it's not Boulder, Colorado, it's not San Francisco, but has some very unique strengths. And then you've got these big cos that are not just big companies, they're industry leaders, right? If Procter says, brand safety is a big deal, it kind of cascades into the industry. And you start to think, okay, maybe there's an opportunity. So what I've been trying to think through is, can we develop an industry out there? Can we lead the world in a few areas? Not all sustainability, but the areas that I'm actually particularly bullish are around the zero waste. I do think there's a lot of work that needs to be done yesterday in that area. And there are quite a few packaging leaders here and design firms. Michaelman's fantastic. P&G's got a division, Influx, that's doing some interesting work. Seca, a Spanish company, just created their largest factory here. That's really, if you just look at their tweets, they're kind of almost like green to a fault. So I think the zero waste area could be an area where we could really develop. And then the other area I'm really obsessed with, and if you go to my LinkedIn page, you can see a blog post that I did called Is Carbon the Future of Shopping? But I just think carbon analytics is a space that really hasn't been developed yet and is waiting for leadership, startup leadership. And there's just no question in my mind that the shopper of the future is going to expect more when they go through the store. I think stores have done a great job on what's the price, what's the rating and review. Kroger's doing a great job now on health scores, but no one's really followed Google's leads and provided a very simple way of knowing what is the carbon footprint of the products that you buy on shelf. And it's just waiting for, I guarantee you, there will be startups that enter that space. And I'm trying to figure out how I can build an industry there, building on our experience and consumer insights. But the point being is that I think there's just a few areas where startup economies can really grow. You need to leverage incumbent strengths, but also see around the corners. And I'm really excited about that challenge. So there's a lot of similarities to what I was doing with Nestle. I'm empowering brand builders to see what's possible. In this particular case, it's a much broader base of change agents.
No, it's interesting because its location also makes it so amazingly unique, because I don't think that people really always understand that synergy between the startup mentality and large corporates. Sometimes I'm not saying that they're enemies in any way, but what I'm saying is that it's amazing that you're trying to harness startups in a direction that can really help consumer brands. and within specific areas. And I think that sometimes you always think that the startup mentality is, do whatever it is and someone will find the need for it. And there seems to be a real focus here.
I mean, even at Nestle, my most popular internal slogan was, the future of marketing is about thinking and acting like a startup. I mean, what do startups do really, really well? First off, they don't have a lot of money. They're really good at listening, translating signals into action. They're really good at, everything's lean. You don't have a lot of money. You may only have one swing at the bat. So you just got to be really crazy resourceful. I mean, that's exactly what big companies need. I mean, they're so bureaucratic. They're so calcified. There's so much fat in the system. And, startups would love that luxury, but they don't have it. And so again, how do you kind of bring that mindset, the balance between formal and informal power? I think startups are really good at leveraging informal power to really, unlock new value. And I think companies can benefit. When I was at Nestle, my most successful program by far that I'm proudest of, I should write a book about it, is that we did over 500 reverse mentorships where we leveraged the young generation, not just young, I don't want to make it sound ageist, it's more the digitally savvy generation reverse mentored the top executives. And that's a great example of where you're putting formal and informal power together. And I think the startup mentality is all about embracing informal power to move faster, to find value that you didn't see before and the like.
All right. And value is a good word because it always turns out to be about value. Let me just go back to something that you started to talk about when you talked about green, and you talked about it is one of the obsessions of the young. There's also another obsession of the young, which very much relates to marketing issues, but I think also in the way that we, dare I say, entertain ourselves now, and that's gaming. I believe that you've got a lot on your mind at that intersection of green and gaming. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked the question. So although I've been thinking about Cincinnati a lot, I was delighted to get invited by a group to give a big speech in Montenegro last June. And the title of my speech was Gamifying Our Future. And what I basically said was that, I basically said there's two big trends with young people today. They're obsessed with green. Just go to TikTok. The numbers are just off the charts, mind-boggling numbers. And number two, they are gamified. And and what's interesting about gamers is that they're very comfortable dilemmas, problems that can't be solved, but which must be managed with creativity and agility. They're not intimidated by being blindsided, disrupted, or presented with unsolvable problems. So there's a gaming mindset that doesn't see challenges. And what my speech basically said is that we're at a pivot moment in the gaming industry where every large gaming company is groveling in front of the world's richest CMOs, basically saying, we're the next advertising vehicle, bless us, endorse us, credential us, give us $1 billion. And these same CEOs, CMOs are kind of putting out a lot of stuff about green. I mean, I've created scorecards of every single top, CPG company. The amount of content they're putting out on green is kind of off the charts. And I said, this is the moment where we put it together. Listen, I mean, I'm a member of the older generation, but you know what? Like, we are not going to figure it out. Like, all of these targets by 2030, we should be outsourcing that to the gamer generation. And we need to kind of, it's comical to me. And again, I don't want to get moralistic here, but it's comical to me that, like, if you look at where, the esports space is taking off like crazy, but the content is monolithic. And I don't think CMOs are asking hard questions about whether this might be the right time to move the challenges into a more beneficial space. I mean, even if 5% of the shooter games converted to green games, we'd probably solve the world's problems 5 years earlier. I mean, I guarantee these kids will figure it out. And so I basically said, hey, this is largely a creative challenge. I don't think CMOs who basically own the ad dollars have dangled the incentives in front of the creative community or the gamer community to sort of say, hey, listen, you can have our sponsorship dollars, but why can't we have kill the carbon? Why can't we have Waste Warriors? Why can't we have Solar Hero? Why on earth isn't there a single game out there called EV Road Race? I mean, everybody is talking ad nauseum about EV. And this is where I think the marketing community needs to kind of look in the mirror and really think about what are we saying every 5 minutes? And how is that playing into the new engagement roadmap? And I don't think it's a difficult bridge, but I think they're thinking in silos. And my speech was like, we need to unite the two. And the good news, the big prize inside is that this generation, I think, will reward the marketers that move in this direction much faster. I mean, these are the future buyers. And so it's all upside. This isn't about, do good just to do good. This is kind of like do good, be opportunistic at the same time, but maybe set some new criteria for how this very, very important gaming industry evolves.
No, that's very interesting, because again, everything that you say is at that interesting nexus point of solving an entrepreneurial problem, a marketing problem, about the explosion of a new medium and what that means to both the consumers of that medium and to the advertisers of that medium. It's interesting. You said something that I was really fascinated by about the gamer mindset and how they're not concerned about being disrupted. Or that's solving challenges is really what it's all about. Is that the mindset that's now taking place in innovation and marketing innovation? Is that the mindset? Is that also the entrepreneurial mindset?
Well,
That's fascinating.
That's certainly the ideal, but I think a lot of us set artificial barriers all the time. And some of it's because we kind of exit a product proposition because it didn't meet yesterday's criteria, or we're just not filtering it through the right lens. And again, I think what's unique about, the young people, I see it with my son. I mean, there's just like no barrier that's too high. I mean, that's gamification. I mean, I think gamification principles are incredibly important. I think that's the way we need to learn in the future. I think there are, ways of give nudges and points. And, I just think there's so much that we can gain. And again, a lot of marketers get this. I mean, Microsoft's into this big time. I mean, the whole industry. I mean, again, attention is there in the gaming. I just don't think we've grafted what's going on into some of our big worldly issues. And it's not just about green. I think we might be able to solve, there's a lot of gamification going on in health. We might be able to better address some of the diversity issues in this, but the one that is, if I really think about what's taking off like crazy on TikTok, and again, I look at those videos, I look at the numbers. I used to work at Nielsen. I pay a lot of attention to where audience is aggregating. Oh my gosh, they are just like, they're not only green, but they're crazy righteous, and the content's going viral. So why on earth are we not mashing that up with the gaming industry? And I do think advertisers have the leverage, because when advertisers say we will or we won't do something, the media industry shifts. I mean, I remember at Nestle, we would kind of, pull out of Facebook or pull out of Google for brand safety. And suddenly they come to the table and they say, what do you need? And so I just think we've got a really unique moment to transform an industry. And let's get the youth, let's get those that are close to the digital future to figure out the future on the green front.
Very, very interesting. I mean, you talk about transform an industry, and you use the examples of media. We've touched on green, sustainability, entrepreneurship, marketing, innovation. You think business models are changing now?
Oh, huge, tremendously. Oh my gosh, like where do I begin? I mean, first off, I do think post-COVID, so much has been kind of thrown into a bit of a tizzy. I mean, kind of future of work. I think we're still kind of negotiating what that looks like. Is it hybrid? I think it's giving life to the metaverse in many respects, AR, VR, virtual reality. And I think that, I think we're gonna have a lot of fun with that for the next 5 years. I think we're gonna a lot of startup growth, testing kind of key hypothesis. I think this whole localization of supply chains is really interesting. I chaired a big committee on the future of supply chains, and that too reinforced my belief that supply chains are green. Like 80% of our recos had to do with last mile delivery that's carbon neutral. circular economy. It's like,
Yeah.
can't, I mean, yeah. And frankly, and if you kind of look at even how the auto industry is transforming and starting to invest in the US, it's all about green supply chains, right? I need my EV plant. I mean, even Intel located in Ohio it was a climate decision, access to water, and they're building the most sustainable, kind of a chip plant in the world. And so there's just like a lot of very unique dimensions. But even separate from the green issue, I think subscription models are kind of changing everything. I think expectations around delivery have been turned upside down. I think, use of data, AI is, I mean, my gosh, I mean, that's getting a little, I don't want to sound alarmist, but there's probably an ugly side of that we really haven't unpacked. Maybe there's some business models there. But yeah, I think everything is kind of changing. That said, I say that with, I'm an urgent optimist, so I see more possibilities if we tackle it with urgency. And so I think that's the key as we kind of look into these possibilities. But nobody should be sitting on their, no one should be kind of, overly comfortable or kind of thinking incrementalism. That's a recipe for big trouble.
Right. No, it is. And it also seems you talk about, I love your term urgent optimist, but it does seem that there's a confluence of so many issues and so much change at this one time. So that said, I mean, you've talked a little bit really about how you're shaping the future of Cintrifuse and the city of Cincinnati and also brands and marketing. But if you had an agenda of the top three things that you would like to now do as in your CEO role, what would it be?
Well, for compliance reasons, I can't talk too much about one part of our business, but but I'm very excited about what we can do with our fund and the role of capital in opening up doors for entrepreneurs, giving momentum to other funds. But I think that is an area where I think Cintrifuse brings some very unique leverage to the table. I'm very excited about fintech. I think fintech is an area that is again, it's not really fintech alone. Fintech is almost inseparable from the metaverse these days, largely because of the gaming space. But I do think that future of financial transactions is an area where we've kind of put that at a very, very high level in terms of things that we can do. And there's a lot of incumbent insurance companies and banks here that are, in the middle of all of that. And so we're trying to figure out how do we create a flywheel with startups and big cos and the like. And then I'm really passionate about the diversity space. I mean, I get as, we had Serena Williams was out here for Black Tech Week. Cincinnati hosts Black Tech Week, and she was one of the keynote speakers. She didn't talk at all about tennis. She's now a venture capitalist. And, she highlighted, 2% of all venture money is going to Black entrepreneurs or diverse entrepreneurs. And those are just big missed opportunities, right? I mean, at Nestle, it was pretty obvious to me working in that global position, touching every part of the world, that innovation and diversity share a symbiotic relationship. And we've just got to figure out how to, turn that into a big unlock. And I think it's doable. There's definitely the will, but we're going to have to make, harder choices. We're going to be a heck of a lot more intentional. I do think some of these growth sectors that I've talked about, especially green tech, climate tech, and even fintech, have the potential to open up a wider door to diverse entrepreneurs. And I think we need to kind of seize the moment on that. But that's another area where if you ask me, boy, what's really important to you? Like before I'm done with this job, do I want to look back and say, okay, I took a town in the Midwest and we kind of helped it see possibilities that it didn't think it was possible. In fact, we even gave it a kind of an unfair advantage. Secondly, we defied gravity and stereotype and kind of turned the Midwest into a beacon of progressive leadership, innovation, and technology on green, right? That's one of those, no, that can't happen outside of San Francisco, right? And then I think on the diversity side, boy, if we could really move the needle on that, I think we could unlock a massive amount of value. And that I'll take all the help I can get on that, but I know it's where I need to go. or we need to go.
Wow. So does that mean then, I know Cincinnati is now pretty unique in this space, but does that mean you see needs in other cities for doing something just as similar?
Oh, I think it's important. Listen, I think we're part of a broader movement. I mean, I love Steve Case's Rise of the Rest book. It's not about Cincinnati. It's not about Louisville. It's not just about Detroit. It's about this cluster of, I would say, overshadowed innovation hubs that, for whatever reason, have not benefited from the math of Silicon Valley. I mean, it defies gravity that 80% of all venture capital goes to 3 states. I don't think that's because smart people. I'll start with my
Go ahead. 3 states.
Yeah, I mean, it defies gravity that 80% of all venture capital goes to 3 states. That's not because people are smarter or money only wants to hang out by the beach. I just think that's habit. That's the way network effects work. And, you know, in the Midwest, we may have to work a little bit harder to just kind of like stake our ground. We may have to work harder to kind of drive some unique advantages, especially with the big cos, and, you know, get the ball rolling. And so that's why, but I see enormous growth potential, not just, you know, Cincinnati, but beyond. I like to think about the whole Midwest as a bit of a great supply way. We're the great supply way to the world. I think with the new industrial policy that's been pushed through, whatever side of the aisle you are, it is going to have a huge impact on the growth and, you know, the industrial / tech, you know, prowess of the Midwest. And we're seeing that with Intel moving to Ohio. We're seeing that with all sorts of activity. And I just think we need to kind of grab it. And I'm certainly very excited to be part of the movement. And I certainly hope that other cities around us, you know, kind of follow our lead in terms of really carving out a much bigger share of the pie.
Well, you are an inspiration, not only in some of the things that you're doing, but some of your urgent visions. And I am absolutely delighted to talk to you, and I hope we make it a regular occurrence, because I think if we wound up talking every quarter, we would breathlessly be on to so many new topics. So you are a joy, and I must thank you for also doing an interview in the midst of fire alarms, which of course we will edit out. But you to maintain your concentration, it shows the level of your passion. So what a joy to talk to you again, Pete.
Thank you very much.
The Internationalist focuses on the continual reinvention of marketing by highlighting inspirational marketers around the world and their ideas as they move the industry forward. Internationalist Marketing TV shares these perspectives through interviews and personal stories.